agenda. Now, before starting and jumping into the presentation and in the webinar, I really want to give the floor to Giorgio, the Managing Director, Giorgio Argenti, the Managing Director of Erion, who is the leading the biggest take-back scheme in Italy, and will tell you a little bit more why we are here today, because it's Erion that inspired this research last year. So I give Giorgio the floor to make an introductory remark.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, Giorgio.
Okay, fine. So first of all, I wish to thank Sophis and especially Federico for inviting me to this workshop. As Federico was saying, Erion is a broad ERP system made with 4 non-for-profit schemes owned by producers. The first one is Erion WE for waste from household electronic appliances. The second one is Erion Professional for electronic waste from professional users. The third one is Erion Energy for waste of batteries. And the fourth one is Erion Packaging for waste of packaging materials. These 4 schemes own a service company. It's named the Erion Compliance Organization that gives the schemes all the necessary services, such as IT, administration, HR, operation, etc. We have been active for 13 years in Italy. In 2020, we handled more than 300,000 tons of waste. And it means that we have a great experience, but all the experience we gained, it has been in Italy. So it is a limited point of view. And I think that it is always wise to take a look around if you want to improve. This is the reason why we asked Sophis to do a study on the best practices of ERP systems in the world. I think that EPR is a powerful tool for waste management that has been used in many different ways as regard the type of responsibility, the approach to operations, the nature of competition, and the level of cost coverage, and other different criteria. So even considering only Italy, the EPR model is different for batteries, for packaging, and as you know, Italy is different from France, it's different from Spain. And the Sophis study gave us, and I hope it will give you as well, a golden opportunity to learn from our peers, to understand what can be improved in our business model. So thank you again to Sophis and Federico, and good job everyone today.
Thank you, Giorgio, for your introduction and kind words. Now, before we start, this is not meant to be a presentation. The report that we work on is available for download on Erion website. We will also circulate the link later on. If you haven't seen, there is a more extended version of the report and also a more executive version. We really want to have an interactive session, so please feel free to use the chat function to put your questions. As you can see from the agenda, I'm now taking no more than 15 minutes to go through very brief introduction about the results of the study, but then we really want to leverage on the experience of the few of the persons that we interviewed during this process. We have Will, we have Robbie, we have also Frederic from leading take-back schemes and PRO across Europe. They will tell you about their experience, and my colleague Josephine will moderate this roundtable. So that's a little bit the plan for today. And now I start with the presentation. And as I said, feel free to really jump in any moment with the chat function, question and answer. Now, the reason behind the study, why have we done this? As Giorgio mentioned, Erion wanted to have a look at what's going on around Europe, but also around the world, because the reality is that EPR schemes are really proliferating, not only in Europe. There are more and more waste streams that are covered: oil, furniture, textiles, single-use plastics, construction, demolition, and this is really a trend that in Europe is quite clear, but also outside Europe. And I know we have participants to this webinar that are calling in from Nigeria and other continents. And one of the key questions was and still is, what are the key factors of the success of EPR scheme? And first of all, what does it mean success for an EPR scheme? Does it mean being cheap? Does it mean collecting a lot of waste? Does it mean being able to engage consumers, engaging producers? And we did, of course, a little bit of desk research, but we spend most of our time talking to people that are running such business since 5, 10 or more years. And we highlighted and we collected more than 50 good practices, because we asked everyone, oh, what does make your system successful? And then we tried to see which one of those practices were potentially interested for Arion in specific Italian context. But of course, this collection of best practices is potentially useful for other people and other countries as well. And last but not least, PRO in most of the cases are funded, are controlled, are managed by producers. And we wanted really to understand what asset can a PRO represent, can be for a producer, for a company that is having as a primary business producing, selling electronic products or batteries or other type of material. So that's in a nutshell why together with Arion we started this study. And I think it's really important to keep something in mind. Here in Europe, the legal context, the background is really changing. We are moving from a scenario where we had a integrated waste management, waste framework directive, and specific directives targeting waste streams. We are moving towards more integrated product management tools like the Green Deal, Sustainable Product Initiative. So more and more different elements of the life cycle of a product are all interlinked in one single piece of legislation. And one of the best examples for this is the upcoming or the proposed battery regulation. Now, except the battery regulation or the proposal for the battery regulation, we know that member states are really developing policies more and more strict at product levels. And I think the circular economy law in France is one of the best examples. And I'm sure Frédéric later on will tell us more about that. And at the same time, this evolution is really creating struggles for manufacturers, irrespective their size, because no matter your size, if you're small, you have some problem. If you're big, multinational, you still have other type of problems. But for manufacturers, for producers, it's a challenge. It's becoming really a challenge being compliant, especially when you're active on more than one market. Now, we identified 5 key elements to map a little bit and streamline the role and the activity operation of take-back scheme. The first element, which is making one scheme different from another one, is definitely the type of responsibility. And you know, in the extended producer responsibility scenario, you might have schemes that are only having financial responsibility. It's really limited at the moment. We are only very few cases about of this scenario in Europe, but it's the case of packaging in UK. But also in other cases, schemes are also having operational responsibility. So they are really organizing collection and treatment and recycling of the waste. The second element is, of course, whether the schemes are implementing an individual or a collective responsibility. Individual it's not that common. We see producers taking care of their own waste only in very specific cases. In particular, when you are talking about complex, large-scale industrial equipment. And the great majority of PRO across Europe are nowadays collective schemes. So basically, they take care of, they ensure compliance with collection and recycle obligation on behalf of their members. In some cases, also a requirement by law, like in Italy, just to mention an easy example, when it comes to electronic waste, you need by law to join a take-back scheme, especially for historical waste. The nature of competition is a third element that is really making the difference between one scheme and another. We have schemes or countries where multiple schemes are competing. There is a free, unregulated competition. And there are other countries where the competition is regulated. Typical example is Italy, where you have a clearinghouse for WEEE and for batteries in particular. And now we will see more and more this kind of coordination mechanisms popping up across Europe because it's a requirement of the new Waste Framework Directive. The fourth element is the cost coverage. Some schemes are only covering operational cost, 100% or part of them. And in other cases, PRO take-back scheme are only taking care of other costs like the communication, awareness raising, auditing, research and development, and so on. And last but not least is the transparency and surveillance. In some countries, in some schemes, this is done at scheme level. In some other countries, there is a stronger role of the central government that is making sure all the schemes are competing in a fair way and is controlling them. In the case of France, running a scheme is not something you woke up in the morning, you decide to set up a scheme. You need to be licensed by ADEME, and ADEME is granting a license for a certain period of year. So as you can see, there are elements, but with those 5 axes, you can really map the role and how schemes are competing or are operating across Europe. Now, this benchmarking was done to try to bridge this gap between the theory and the practice. The theory means that we looked into the analysis of current performances of schemes across Europe, looking at very factual elements, collection, how much they collect, the recycling rate, and so on. And this is, of course, depending on the schemes, but also on the legal framework, so the country in which the scheme they operate. And we try to see what could happen in the future. And I think one of the dreams is that there will be more harmonization across Europe. This is one of the expected and desired, outcome of some of the political movement and evolution in Brussels right now. If you think about the proposal for the better regulation. But it's important to bridge this gap. And Arion, in the case of Italy, a few months ago, produced a white paper. I'm not sure it's available in English, but it's available in Italian. And they come up with very pragmatic and concrete proposals. And they put this on the table of the Ministry of Environment to say, hey, we want to move from the current status to a situation where the system is working better. And they collected a list of ideas, suggestions from different actors along the supply chain, and they proposed this to the ministry. Now, before starting, the debate, I just want to show quickly 3 charts that are giving an idea of how Italy and the other main countries, France, UK, Spain, and Germany, are performing when it comes to the 3 main waste streams: WEEE, packaging, and batteries. So when it comes to WEEE, you see at European level, the struggle is always about the collection level. We know that ambitious collection targets are still far to be reached in the great majority of European countries. When it comes to recycling performances, the situation is not that bad. I mean, we know that when we are handed over and the PRO are taking care of that, the quality of the treatment is good. That's also one of the reasons why there is a strong push to ensure the standards are made mandatory across Europe to ensure better quality. When it comes to PRO in itself, you see that Germany is the only country where there are no de facto take-back scheme, PRO, collective is mainly producer compliant individually. In UK and Germany, we have also schemes, consortia that are for profit. They can be for profit. That's not the case in the other countries. And when it comes to the number of collection points, you see here how Italy compared to other countries, in particular bigger countries or countries that are more or less the same size of Italy in terms of geography, in terms of surface, is definitely having a lower collection point. When it comes to batteries, portable batteries in particular, again, the recycling rate, the collection rate for portable batteries is still quite low, and we know that the future target of the battery regulation that are much higher will trigger or will have to trigger some changes, and I think that's really good to have the discussion afterwards how we can increase the collection of batteries. Italy is the only country among the big five across EU, or 4 plus UK, that is having a clearinghouse mechanism responsible for allocation of collection points for batteries as well. And when it comes to the amount of batteries collected, you see that in Germany, when we look at the real tonnage collected, they are collecting almost twice the amount of portable batteries compared to Italy. And last but not least, we have a packaging. When you see packaging, the collection rate, the collection versus the packaging waste generated is much higher compared to the other two waste streams. But of course, we need to consider the packaging is also one of the system most consolidated across Europe. The system that started, first, probably almost 20 or 30 years of history in some of the countries. But it's also the system where you have more diversity in terms of approaches from one country towards another country. I think UK is the country which is having the system which is probably radically different from the other countries, but now UK is also going through a radical transformation. There is a review of the packaging law that is undergoing, and again, Robbie will probably tell us more about that, or will have more to say, but that's something that we need to remind. Again, there are no countries with coordination mechanism, and it's also one of the cases, except UK, where probably we have more monopoly rather than competition. But I really don't want to spend more time talking. I think it's really time to give the floor to the managers of different schemes, so that this event can really be an interactive discussion with among the managers, but also with the participants. So I stop here. I hand over to my colleague Josephine, who will give you other insights and will moderate this roundtable. Josephine, you have full control. I will monitor the chat, question and answer. So please feel free to pop in your question anytime.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Federico. So as actually Giorgio mentioned it at the very beginning, this study was not just about looking at the theoretical part, but it was also about looking at what are the EPR schemes actually doing, what are they putting in place. And so to answer this part of this study, we had met and we interviewed a few people from different EPR schemes within each of the streams in all of the countries. So batteries, packaging, and but also we thought it would be interesting to open our horizon and looking at different waste streams than these three that I just mentioned, including, for example, textiles, tires, as well as oil, and bringing us, for example, to Canada with Will. And so out of this part of the study, we actually realized that there were a set of elements that were often found in these EPR schemes, which actually lead to success. And some of them include, for example, an extensive network of collection points, so wide geographical collection points, but also the monitoring of the regulatory changes. Oh, I think, Federico, you're still sharing your screen. Yeah. Thank you. And then we also have the supporting of the companies within that are part of that are members of their schemes, and also another important aspect, which is awareness raising activities for the consumers. So now I'm going to let the floor to the four panelists. So the first panelist is Giorgio Arienti, who already presented himself, so from Erion. But we also have Frédéric Edouin, who was from Corpil, which actually collects, recycles portable batteries and accumulators, which are put on the French market by its members. Then we have Robbie Stainforth from EcoSurety, which is a B Corp certified producer responsibility compliance scheme on 3 waste streams. So not as the others, which are focused only on 1 waste stream, but here has a bigger grasp. So on packaging, and batteries in the UK. And finally, we have Will Burrows from BUCOMA, which stands for British Columbia Used Oil Management Association, which is a not-for-profit PRO, which is dedicated to collecting and recycling lubricating oil, oil filters, oil containers, antifreeze and antifreeze containers in British Columbia, which is a part of Canada. So I let the floor to each of you now so that you can present yourself. Giorgio, as you already did, I'm not sure if you have anything to add now. If not, I will let Frédéric present himself.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for the introduction. I'm in Corepil for 10 years. It stands for Collect, Recyclage, Collection, Recycling of Pile. Pila, it's like in Italian, is more for the single-use batteries, non-rechargeable or primary batteries. But of course, we're in charge of all rechargeable batteries, portable, and we launched 3 years ago a voluntary stream on e-bike batteries. And I presented at the ICBR last week the good success we have so far on e-bike batteries, so light electric vehicle or light means of transport batteries. I'll probably present more of the activities of Corepil, but just to complete the presentation earlier on the French specifics, we are under state approval for portable. It's not by ADEME. ADEME is just a technical agency for the ministry. We are approved by the ministries of environment and the ministries of economy in France. So we have 2 ministries. We are on state approval. We have in France a lot of schemes for all categories. I think we're probably the widest range of streams across Europe, because we now have cigarettes, what's new, oil, toys, DIY, on top of all the classical packaging, chemicals, health, and so on. Batteries is one of the oldest stream, over 20 years, as in Europe. In France, we have limited competition. We have most of the time, all those streams are on monopoly. On batteries, WEEZ, and mobilier, ameublement, furniture. There are 2. So it's a limited competition compared to Germany or Italy, even more, as far as I know. And just to complete, we are expecting, of course, the new battery regulation that is supposed to replace the former directive, and that will give much more clarity and detail, and will impose clearer classification and more classification on industrial, especially for mobility and storage. Will give new objectives, and we'll come back to that, on collection, on recycling rates, on recycled content. But it's all very technical and very in-depth, whereas the local circular economy laws that we have are much more administrative, transversal to many streams. They are more in terms of national register. It's not quite a clearinghouse, but national register to compile all the data for all the streams. How to also monitor stakeholder sharing, information sharing. So there are more and more committees with rules for making sure all stakeholders are informed, if not on board with the decisions, because we're still the acting force of the streams, the CROs in the respective aspects. We have combined force for research, communication, to secure also municipality collection and so on. And the one point I wanted to clarify also on the collection rates, we see collection rates have to be above 45% sort of directive rate calculated on 3-year put on market. It's actually not taking into consideration the dynamics of the markets, of the put on markets and the growth markets, especially on batteries, on rechargeable. And there is a lot of research for available for collection methodology to calculate collection rate, because as a broad brush, we are very close to 50% collection rate this year. We will be this year in France. That corresponds to 75%. It's at least 20 to 25% gap with available for collection, which means it's not 50% we're collecting of what's available. It's to 75%, and then it's much tougher to grow. This is why the objectives to have radical growth, we are talking of plus 15, plus 20, plus 25% in the 10 years horizon, is probably corresponding to 100% collection rate for batteries, which for that kind of stream is probably unrealistic. But that's a political choice. We already see that on when you have probably too high or unrealistic objectives, then to be cynical, you can't reach them.
Yes.
Then the issue is when you have you are fined, or you have financial sections, which we have in the circular economy package now in France, and this is dangerous for the financial health of our streams.
Yes,
so thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frederic. I think we'll go back into this detail, into this point of policy, because it's definitely an important one. But before that, I'd like to give the opportunity to the others to present themselves. Robbie, if you want to go ahead.
Hey, thanks very much. So thank you to Frederico, and thanks to Josephine and the Sophie's team for the invitation to contribute to the report in the first instance, and now to the webinar also. I'm the Innovation and Policy Director at EcoSurety. We're a PRO in the UK, where there is a competitive market across waste electricals, batteries and packaging. Really interested by some of the remarks there by Frederic, particularly about e-bike batteries and the voluntary scheme going on there, because it's a evolving waste stream that we're starting to look at tackling here in the UK also. Pleasure to be here in the esteemed company. I think I kind of feel a little bit similar to Giorgio before he commissioned the study, and that's that, you know, I haven't really learnt from the lessons around the other PROs globally. EcoSurety spent most of our times looking at other industries for good ideas about how they innovate, how they do things differently, looking at the B Corp certification process, which I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about, and the way that the companies hold themselves and operate. And that's been our sort of modus operandi for the massive changes we've made in our organization over the last 5 to 10 years. And so I suppose today for me is a fantastic opportunity to learn from others, to understand how things work across the rest of Europe and across the world. So a big thank you once again to Giorgio for commissioning this work. It is so important. I think just the final thing, Josephine, before I allow you to let the others introduce themselves, is one of the things about the UK is there are a lot of producer compliance schemes. And so when people look across and you know, we were obviously honoured to be plucked out as one of the leading ones and recognized as one sort of doing a bit more than the average, so to speak, and going above and beyond. One of the things about competition is there is a need to raise the bar and set a minimum standard. So while we're big advocates of the innovation that comes through competition and through options for producers, through producer choice of how they discharge their obligations under these various producer responsibility regimes, that actually, one really important thing is how you regulate that competitive market itself, because it's very easy to water down some of these regulations if the minimum standards aren't set to a high enough level. I'll leave it there for now and look forward to the discussion. Thanks, Josephine.
Thank you very much, Robbie. And I think the last one is Will.
Good morning, Josephine. Good morning, everybody. My name is Will Burrows. I'm the Director of Consumer Collection and Sustainability for the BC Used Oil Management Association. I'm joining you today from the traditional lands of the Cowichan First Nation in British Columbia, Canada. We're on the West Coast and it's around 7:30 a.m. in the morning here. Our program, the BC Used Oil Management Association, has been in existence for 17 or 18 years now. We are the only PRO that collects used oil in British Columbia, although there are no limits on competition in the market. We work closely with other used oil collection agencies across Canada, and we report to the Ministry of Environment on an annual basis and have to publish an annual report. And then every 5 years, we have to develop a stewardship plan, which is again submitted for approval to the BC Ministry of Environment, and also it has to be consulted on across our network of collectors and consumers and our members as well. And that's happens every 5 years. It's a 5-year process. So with that, I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Will. Thank you all of you for this quick introduction. I think I'd like to start really in the heart of the subject, which is something that was already mentioned by Federico, which is in regards of the collection. So we know that collection is a very big challenge, not one of the biggest challenge actually for EPR schemes and in general to actually achieve recycling and to achieve the circular economy that so many countries are targeting at. And so my question to all of you is actually, what is, according to you, the biggest challenge in achieving your collection rate? And some ways you've been able to overcome these, or some ways you're working on to actually meet these collection targets. I don't know who amongst you would like to start the conversation.
Well, I'm happy to do that, Josephine. I think from British Columbia's point of view, used oil is a regulated hazardous waste, and finding sufficient partners and collection sites across our vast province is one of the biggest challenges. We've worked with local governments and with private operators. The consumers tend to take things back to one central location. They like convenience, has to be a priority for them. And if they can take all their products back to one location, that's certainly the most convenient for them. So we work with local governments who operate transfer stations and recycling depots, as well as private companies, and provided them with incentives to help them collect and manage these products. Incentives in the form of grants that provide for infrastructure, signage, and equipment, as well as paying them compensation per litre, and also provide them with ongoing support once they've established themselves.
Yeah, so I can address the question. I think really the challenges that we've seen sort of most clearly at EcoSurety have probably been in the batteries and waste electrical areas. So trying to achieve these collection rates, we have the twin problem of either citizens just don't know how to dispose of it responsibly, or in the moment when they just want convenience to dispose of items that are often very small, so small electronics or small, single-use batteries, they make the wrong choice. They make a bad choice based on convenience and the fact that, you know, using their general waste bin is much easier than any other alternatives. We also have the issue of citizen hoarding, and so people keeping electrical items for a rainy day, so to speak, and by the time they become defunct, hopefully they're storing them all up so that eventually they will be disposing of them correctly and in the appropriate way. But that's not always the case, and it does mean that it's a challenge to meet these, you know, recycling rates, which are based on, you know, latency in the home of either a year or 3 years in the case of batteries. I suppose our approach to tackling those challenges has been through awareness campaigns. So we've run national awareness campaigns on batteries under the sort of hashtag Bring Back Heavy Metal and all the heavy metals that there are within them. So in an engaging way to get people to think about it. We've also done things more locally, not wasting batteries, certainly in Bristol, which is where we're located in the UK. And we've worked with charities and retailers to get up the collection point. But I think the most important thing and the biggest way that we've overcome collection rates is not by saying we are eco-surety, we're the ones who are going to tackle this problem on our own in a competitive way. It's actually through collaborating between the PROs. So we talk a lot in the UK about there being a competitive market. However, you know, much can be achieved through collaboration as much as through competition. And just because there's different organizations competing in this space doesn't mean they can collaborate. And two really good examples of that have helped to make things easier for the average person is when we closed down our battery bank locator that was our own proprietary website, and we had 4 competitors who also had their own proprietary websites, and we were all competing to get people to go to our website to find our collection container so we could hit our rate. Actually, what I led was a project with one of the charities here in the UK to get all of those on one system, because if you're the average person in the UK, you just want to know where all the battery locations are to deposit your batteries. It doesn't matter whether it's eco-sureties or any other producer compliance scheme. And then finally, on the waste electricals, we now have centrally managed communications campaigns that are specifically targeted at the average citizen, and that's funded by the system itself rather than individual PROs. So I suppose biggest challenge in meeting those collection rates is some of the awareness stuff, and the way to get over that is actually through collaboration. Just because you have a competitive system doesn't mean you can't collaborate.
A few words about Italy. You know, here the responsibility for reaching the collection target is not with the pros, lies with the state. So what we have to do, what the pros have to do, it's to ensure that we manage all the WEEE that are made available at the public and private collection centers. And for the state, the biggest challenge to achieve the European collection targets, in my opinion, is the parallel market. All the private companies trying to maximize their profits without taking care of the environment. So they look for WEEE and they treat WEEE in a very bad way, and they get some money out of it. And it's a very huge market. It's a very huge black market. It's more than half of the total. And this is what the state has to face if the state wants to reach the European target.
Thank you very much. I think jumping back on what Robbie you were saying about the raising awareness, there's one thing that comes to mind is actually Corepil, which is very, very involved in awareness raising through having, being linked to influencers or through putting in place game places in Paris. And so I was wondering, how much of a role do you think it is awareness raising for Frederic, and how much do you think it is? What is the importance of it in you conducting your, your collection rate?
it's not a classical awareness, I would think, because our awareness on the name of the company, on the CRO, is very limited. Corepil. Our mascot, the ant, where do I have?
I think you have one, attached at the back otherwise.
Which is really, we have several ants here. We're mad about ants. And we do an ant work carrying all those tiny batteries to recycle them. But the key element that was raised also by some of the speakers is visibility of the network. So we really put a lot of investment on consumer visibility, also, which is at the maximum almost, I think, but also visibility in B2B, in some professional industrial areas that we still have room for improvement. And of course, we try, because collecting and recycling is recurring, ongoing, and it's boring. And batteries are boring to use, boring to recycle. So the idea is to try to make things simple, a little more fun, through digital, through some events, through some protocols of spring cleaning or back to school periods where we tend to have some checkpoints with the public. We do very classical direct marketing, which is quite costly but effective, of those boxes that are about 1 year of a typical household collection. It's very, very small. It's 500 grams. And the amount of batteries a couple with 2 kids would typically recycle per year. And we do direct marketing in the mailbox of them. We sample millions of mailbox. Our Belgian colleagues do that too, to try and have the package and all-in-one with all the instructions on the collector, the in-house collector, that would be then emptied in the different collection points, mostly stores or distribution centers. But
I have actually a question, Frederic, is from what Ruby was saying, is that they collaborate between the PROs for this kind of marketing and awareness raising. Is it something that you do as well between Corepil and Skrelec, if I remember correctly?
Well, not much with Skrelec. They are technically our competitor. We are more complementary because they are not very present into the public. They are mostly in professional networks, and we are 95%. We own 95% of the public, of the citizen public network. So, but we are, for instance, we share some common containers and communication with the ecosystem, our big brother in We, for instance. We have a huge container, multi-spot, multi-stream for the consumers in large potential, in large stores. And the one point I wanted to raise also in the challenge we face that might be typical for batteries or We, is the second life. I think we raised the available for collection thing, and we are maybe not to the maximum, but close, so we're reaching soon. But there is an issue we have to consider for complex batteries, multi-cells batteries, is the importance, and I know we are already involved in things like that, of reuse, repair, repurpose of batteries from mobility to storage use, from storage use to alternative use, because there will be scarcity of the cells and of the materials and the metals in the future, long term, but it's coming. And it's really important we maximize the life of them. And that's a criteria which is still very open of how the second use, which is going to delay the ultimate recycling, is going to be captured into the performance of the CRO or the country. It doesn't really matter. So it's an issue that's probably specific to the electronics related product. It's a big issue, and for us, we're getting there because it didn't exist really on portable. You couldn't really reuse or have a second life for round cells batteries or phone batteries. which for e-bike batteries and even more for car batteries, for full electric car batteries, is a big challenge and opportunity. There's a lot to that. It's still very open, but we have to experiment many opportunities.
And it's very interesting, and I like what you mentioned at the beginning, how actually with whom you tend to work would be more with we PROs. And I think this is a great way to have you to answer to this question from Federico Vasquez, which is, how do you think batteries and we must be together actually in a single unified program, which would be similar to what Robbie have in England, in the UK, with one and the same program having two different waste streams. What is your position on this, Frederic? And then Robbie, maybe tell us what you think about having these two things unified in one.
Well, you have in a lot of countries, we and batteries started together. Typically, when batteries were already in place, they're more co-working. We don't know in the future with the larger potential of mobility batteries, bigger size. I think I'm right. Erion took over Remedia in Italy. So the we scheme took over or joint, maybe Remedia was already into we, but there are many examples also in Portugal, in Germany, anyway, we and batteries are working together, and there might be fusion or more and more collaboration. Then it really depends on the choice. In France, there is a trend towards there are not so many CROs per stream, but there are many streams. So we tend to have CROs that are multi-specialist. They would do sometimes furniture or electric furniture. They would do chemicals, extinctors, diversification. Well, packaging is doing also paper on top of packaging. The furniture in France is going to have DIY, sport and leisure. I heard also, for instance, packaging is looking at cigarettes. So the tips, cigarette tips that are in plastic. So there are many opportunities. It's really a maturity issue and probably not quite a capitalistic issue, but it's more an opportunity to have some synergies, cost to market, because we are usually non-profit, but our effectivity is quite key. And this is even more so the case in small, I would say, and there is no small country per se, but geographically, countries like Luxembourg, for instance, have a really multi-stream already.
Yes, just to say, in Erion, we have two schemes, one for batteries and one for we, but it's not one single system, because in Italy we have two different legislations, two different kind of responsibility, two different clearinghouse. So we have created two schemes, but one is serving just the we sector, and the other one is serving the battery sector. Of course, some of the producers are the same, because a producer can put on the market both the equipment and the battery, but we are far away from a single system in the country.
Yeah, I think getting towards a single system, in the first instance, sounds like it's an obvious evolution, and that would just make it simpler for everyone if batteries just became another category of waste electrical. But actually, you know, in the UK, when I was mentioning those co-benefits of collaboration, it's really just the citizen has one single system to engage with. So the way that they get rid of small mixed we, the way that they get rid of batteries and recycle them is a coherent, similar thing. So as the average sort of user of producer responsibility when it comes to your product comes to end of life, you have a sort of seamless experience regardless of what that material is. And Frederic mentioned some of those with some of the other streams. However, the system that underpins all of that, that sits with below it, is complicated. The waste streams are very different. And in fact, I feel like batteries is moving further away from the WE system rather than closer to it, because of what Frederic mentioned about the larger batteries. You know, those batteries and their reuse applications, and designing a system for battery that takes into account all the small single-use ones, the reusables, all the way to the larger industrial ones and the automotive ones, actually probably mean batteries needs to kind of stand on its own 2 feet and be developed more in separation to the challenges of electronic and electrical equipment. So one experience for the average citizen, but 2 schemes sat underneath it with different objectives and different systems.
I think the driver, as I agree, the driver is the collection logic to the consumer or to the professionals. But I would tend, we don't know what will be the future, and it might depend countries. The batteries, the complex batteries are more and more full of electronics with BMS, connectics, and so on. Even cars, the electric cars are big computers on wheel. And the technicality of having things just to drive is going to be less and less, but the things are more in artificial intelligence and autonomy and so on. So I think with the so-called decarbonization of our societies and a big way to more and more devices, electronics, artificial intelligence, connection of devices and so on, our life, our connected lives, and our and with the energy supply, they are close. They are closer and closer technically, and it might shift one way or another. They can definitely co-work anyway because they share a lot in commons. Even the store channels, for instance, another collaboration with WE, just to mention it, we collect in some small points, small appliances for big CROs in WE's, just because we are the driving stream. The battery stream is the bigger one, and the small electronics, iron, whatever electronic devices in the kitchen are dumped close to the batteries, and we are the driving stream. So in some cases, we are the small brother with a big brother is watching you. But I think our future is linked. It might vary in countries and because of the history, but we are linked to work together and probably closer and closer. But the driving force is the consumer. To be effective in the collection performance, we have to be closer to what the consumer, to make the consumer and citizens' life easier to bring back, because we are all streams to be brought back. We're not like packaging in most countries, taken from home or the flat. The consumers have to make the first kilometer, and then we do the rest. And that's a big challenge, to get disciplined, especially in some countries where discipline is not a given, to do this and not dump their devices or their electronics anywhere.
Yes, no, I think it's a very, very interesting way to look at it. This product, which in the end is switched between the WE and the batteries, or the packaging, which includes an electronic product, including a battery. And I think it makes me think of the oil EPR scheme in Canada. So it's a question here for Will, because there you don't just have an EPR scheme for oil or one for the containers, which is in the end packaging, but everything is grouped under BUCOMA. Is that right, Will?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So our program covers not only the oil, but also antifreeze, oil filters and the packaging that the oil and antifreeze is in. So the collection locations have to be able to store the oil in tanks or in some bulk system, as well as have sufficient space to store the empty containers and drums for the filters and drums for the antifreeze as well. So the collection is performed by registered collectors who go around with perhaps a tanker to extract, to pick up the oil and the antifreeze. And then they would have a box van that would pick up the drums, filters, and the plastics as well. And again, because oil and antifreeze and the filters are regulated as a hazardous waste, the collection network has to be licensed and have a manifest for what they're transporting on the highways.
Is there anything, as Giorgio was mentioning before, actually, such as a black market? Is it something that exists in Canada for this market or not?
There's not a black market for the products, although some of the products get diverted and are used as a fuel alternative. So some industrial operations may have heaters that can burn the used oil as a fuel source, as an alternative. So that material isn't available for us to recycle. And there are regulations in place that require they have it tested before they burn it to make sure that it meets certain criteria. But the majority of the oil is collected. 95% of the oil that we pick up comes from commercial and industrial operations, so large operations that are generating. And then the consumer is a smaller volume that's picked up from the DIY and the small business operator that might be changing their own oil in their equipment or in their vehicle.
Yes, thank you very much. I think actually, Giorgio, there was a question from you, from Maria Tancredi, which is asking for you to define a little bit more what you call this black market.
Yes, okay. In Italy, at least, we have several operators, several treatment operators in different sectors than the WE sector, such as scrap dealers or car shredders, and they should not put their hands on the WE, but they do. And they go to the local authorities, collection centers, or to the retailers, collection centers. They offer money to get the WE. And the reason why they're able to offer money is simply that they have a treatment process, which is very simple. I would say too much simple. They do not respect any standard, any quality standard, and they have no cost. And they offer money, they can offer money for this. This is a black market, and it's not that unofficial. I mean, everyone knows that the market is there, and it shouldn't be difficult to find out it, to go and look. But this black market, including, also some illegal exports of used EE, which are in reality WE. All these parallel flows sum up to a very huge amount of WE. I would say more than half of the WE generated by the Italian citizens go the wrong way.
I suppose it comes back to how sort of policies are designed and what governments hope to achieve through producer responsibility. And if it's to sort of make the problem of WE go away, it would be turn blind eye to black market, problem goes away. If it's to have an acceptable minimum treatment standard and to capture and record the amount of electronics coming off the market, whether it be for reuse or recycling, then it requires different bits of legislation. And we, maybe not to the same extent, Giorgio, but we suffer from the very similar things, scrap metal dealers, etc. And we, on the upside, there's a market for this stuff. Isn't that brilliant? A secondary market. We would kill for a secondary market for some of the other problem materials in packaging, for example. But just because there is this secondary market doesn't mean it's a good market, doesn't mean that the material's being treated correctly. So I think you do highlight a good point there, and why policy and the actual technical definitions within these regulations are so important to the overall governance and the outcomes that the system achieves.
I think we're reaching an important point here. Policies and the role that it has in ensuring that EPR schemes are doing the right things, but also in ensuring black market in these secondary markets. What is your, we've heard of it at the beginning by Federico, who mentioned the CE Act. So the CE Act is here. Obviously, I'm looking at Frederic on the importance of this circular economy law, which was published about a year and a half ago in France, and which drastically changed actually the future and the vision of the EPR schemes. What is your view on this, Frederic?
My view is it's probably make our life a little more complicated. A lot is asked to the CROs here. We have to do the police with the put on market, the free riders. We have to provide as much job as possible to all the local collectors and recyclers. We have to put recommendations for eco-modulation of a price list and so on. So, but I think they're probably asking us to do too much versus what we're supposed to do, which is do the proper end-of-life recycling. And there tend to be a shift from the responsibilities of the producers to the CROs that are experts, that have a very large view, a very strong expertise, but could not be responsible of everything. I think that's probably a French tendency. And there are good points, so we should be careful not to make too much, because we are small companies in the end, even if we are helped by a lot of suppliers, operators in the technicals, and some consultants, some workforce as well. But I think what is good in what's in place, and I touched on it already, so I won't be long, is the stakeholder to sort of better organize the stakeholder consultation, so that all key parties are aware of what's going on and can advise, give their opinion, even if we have to make some choices. But this is documented. We often have to work together on security issues, on long-term financial issues, on communications. For instance, the CRO is not responsible only for communicating on recyclings. On batteries, we tend to have the producers not communicate so well on the end of life of their products. It's changing, mentality is changing, and green positioning is helping. But so all parties should probably take more of their responsibilities, even if ultimately the producers are financing us, so they delegate with their funds the activities. We are still embracing it. But, in short, in France, it's more administrative, more control, more reports. Hopefully, they are staffing back more the state agency ADEME, also in the ministry. But they also want to choose so many streams at the moment, as there's a sort of a traffic control has to operate into the approvals that are accumulating on the ministry's desk at the moment. So, but that's also a French specialty, administrative burden.
Yeah, I think to give a UK perspective on where policy becomes vital, and speaking a little bit about circular economy package and moving in that direction. I think I mentioned it earlier, but these real small quirks in definitions and the way that these pieces of legislation are written can really limit the impact that PRO can have and lead to perverse outcomes. So we have that a little bit in the batteries over here, and the fact that there's a heavy reliance on recycling one particular chemistry, lead acid, as opposed to the more emerging and more common chemistries, lithium type technologies. And that's just a very small quirk in a definition that's led to that outcome. And so when the actual legislation itself is designed, really the legislators need to think, is this a cost limiting exercise? Is it about meeting a target? Is it about making a problem go away? Or do they genuinely want to facilitate some change? Because, you know, Federico's got probably a more direct experience there, but to transition to a circular economy and use producer responsibilities and PROs to help do some of that, it does require much more sophisticated systems and rules and regulations. And how you do that, I noticed there's a couple of questions come up about reuse systems and packaging systems. How you create something that, let's be honest, the current producer responsibility regimes that are out there really are just regulating a linear economy, and they're dealing with the issue of recycling, and we're on the journey towards a circular economy. But what that really means is that the actual regulation, the legislation itself, as Federico again said, requires a lot of design and a lot of careful thinking. My reflections on an experience here in the UK, certainly on packaging, that's Federico mentioned, you know, is going to be is up for widespread reform, is that the stakeholder engagement, both formal and informal, through, you know, public consultations and surveys to respond to, but also the informal workshops that have been facilitated by the government ministries, has been very good. Lots of people would say it's slow progress. We said in 2018 we'd change our packaging regulations. It's 2021 and we don't have a new piece of law to sort of pore over and give our views on. That is slow, but actually it needs to be slow and it needs to be carefully thought out, because this is like a step change in what producer responsibility tries to achieve. And so you can't just say, add this little bit, bolt on that. It needs to be redesigned, some of these things from the ground up. If governments are genuine about a circular economy and it's not just kind of lip service and the same sort of take, make, dispose, hopefully recycle if we can, hopefully collect as best we can.
In British Columbia, the provincial government regulate the programs, and they do so looking for a performance-based outcome, not prescriptive. So they look for continuous improvement in the program. They look at accessibility for the residents to be able to recycle. They look at awareness. They look at the amounts of product that we collect and recycle. And they look to continue to move the products and how they're managed up the waste hierarchy to make sure that they are indeed being recycled and keep pushing that envelope. So, you know, we report them on an annual basis, and every 5 years we have to review our plan and make sure that we're meeting the performance standards that we've said we would.
I guess sorry, go ahead, Roger.
No,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Just a small consideration concerning policies. I think we also need a strong support to the transition to a circular economy. In Italy, at least, raw materials are not used that much. Secondary raw materials. I mean, so we need policies to support the use of recycled materials in the new products, and without such as fiscal measures or incentives, I think circular economy simply won't happen, because the pressure of virgin raw materials and is too high, and so we have it's difficult for our treatment operators to find a market for the materials they take out of the weed.
I wanted, Josephine, if you allow me, also to quickly add on this. I saw Arion published a couple of weeks ago some very concrete recommendation and suggestion to the ministry on how to use a part of the recovery fund, of the funds coming from the recovery recovery plan of a Green Deal. When it comes to creation of a network of repair and reuse center, development of small-scale hydrometallurgical process, because I think the point mentioned by Robert is very true. Sometimes we look at EPR or EPR schemes like well, managing the status quo. But if we want to implement circular economy principle, well, of course, there is much more than just the end of life and recycling, which is, of course, an important part, but something else. And to implement this, probably you need more support from policy, but also maybe some targeted investment in certain infrastructures.
I think this brings actually a very good question from Natalia Sierra, who asked, what is your view on the role of EPR take-back system on developing services in the previous stages of the product becoming waste, so before it becomes waste? And it is a conflicting thing with what you just said, Frederic and Robbie, on how the policies are putting more and more barriers to you and more actions to take on, which kind of pushes you away from your original purpose.
On the reuse, repurpose, second, third life, it's really both with the French legislation and at least on batteries, the new regulation. And here there will be more streams under European regulation in the long term. Or there are rumors that vehicles, maybe packaging will get into this. So that will streamline more and more the regulation across Europe. We are still at the start of it, and it is true we can be instrumental in helping identify the products that are not quite at their end of life, and facilitate the social economy or regular economy to better identify those and avoid linear economy, too much waste. But it's not so easy to do, as the legislation, when we capture some waste already, it's registered as waste, and it's not so easy to have the ability to give it a second life, even a commercial life, because e-bikes batteries that are easily repairable and can work at 80% of their initial capacity for half the price, it's a new market. And there are a lot of players at the moment that sort of play around, and the rules are not quite stabilized. So it's quite interesting. It's one of the examples. E-bike batteries is quite an interesting one, but there are many examples in WE, where in France, for instance, there are huge funds for repairability reuse in WE. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of euros are reinjected by the CROs to facilitate social economy on reuse for WE. It's sort of happening, and sometimes it's probably too big to be true or effective. But there are massive transfer of funding to sort of facilitate this second life before the end recycling. There is a lot to it. We will be doing some experiments. It's a big change of paradigm, and I do think that the politics, the regulation, is a key factor. Maybe I think it's Federico was asking for incentives, maybe financial incentives for the use of recycled materials. Possibly it is coming anyway for metals. The metals, like the energy, are going to get more and more expensive. So maybe actually we won't be useful in the end, because there will be enough money in the reuse so that batteries will be recycled by themselves. Like lead batteries, already starter lead batteries, which is the biggest bulk of the batteries across Europe. They are self-financed, so you don't need a CRO to deal with them. Like on oil, I guess, I think there is a market at the moment with the economics for soil oil for recycle that finance itself. So There are a lot of questions. I'm not sure my point of view is so clear or helps but there are questions up in the air.
Just get in before I'm sure Will probably wants to respond on the oil and the dynamics there. But from my side, when we're looking at this, products, before they reach their final life, their end of life, it's really a philosophical question about how involved governments and legislation can get involved in those marketplaces. We appreciate that you want to sort of raise the bar, as I keep mentioning, to try and get rid of the black economy that Giorgio referenced earlier. So they can get involved to try and get rid of some of the sort of grey or black economy, however you want to look at it, that marketplace. However, when it's asset tracking, when it's things like eBay and secondary use and me as an independent person selling my secondhand goods, which are near either fully working or just need a bit of tinkering to make them work again, there's a very limited scope actually that governments can get involved in. So I think we can go a step further in terms of preparing things for reuse and a reuse market, particularly for batteries and waste electricals, than we have done at the moment, certainly in the UK. But I think it needs to be recognized that it's not a big brother state where we're trying to asset track and asset manage every single item and product around the economy. I fear that's the sort of way that people are thinking is the only way we can tackle this problem of making sure things recirculate. And that's just, nigh on impossible. Going back to Federico's point, what you do is you create the market and you create the will for that to happen. And that's through different incentives to just a reuse target placed on the PROs. Sorry, Will, I'm sure you're itching to get in on the oil question.
That's all good, Robbie. Frederica is absolutely right. I mean, oil is an internationally traded commodity. Here in British Columbia, we have very little influence on the price of that. And in January of 2020, when the crude price dropped, and with the onset of the pandemic as well, it presented a lot of challenge because the value of oil dropped and the collectors were in a difficult position and had to store it. We're fortunate here in British Columbia that we have processing available and a refinery that the used oil can go to. And used oil is 100% recyclable and can be turned back into base oil. And so the refinery we have in British Columbia can take that oil in and refine it, produce base oil again, and then it can be sold out into the market as new oil. We're also fortunate to have antifreeze processors that can redistill the antifreeze that's collected and remove the glycol from it and produce new antifreeze from that glycol. And we also have a plastics recycler that can take the plastic containers that we provide them, they grind them up, they wash them, and they turn them back into a resin that's sold on the market and is sold as new resin. So we're fortunate in British Columbia that we have those systems in place and can participate in the circular economy and move that needle forward.
Thank you very much, Will. I think there is an interesting question from Mashid Mojabi, which is your view on the recycle hierarchy and the reusable products and packaging. Should there be more focus on reusable products rather than achieve circular economy?
Sorry, after you, Will.
No, you go ahead, Robbie.
Yeah, I think on plastic packaging and packaging in general, reusable packaging is something that's been a huge issue and underpins some of the changes that we're trying to make here in the UK. So it's something I've been given a lot of thought to. And actually, these circular systems for packaging, we've achieved it with things like pallets, wooden pallets that are asset managed and only ever owned by a central company and go around a system whereby they're incentivized to go and get their pallets back because it's their asset. It's not something that's been sold. And so I think good legislation might well start to look at how does one prove that it is genuinely a reusable system, and then exempt it from producer responsibility. Might be a better way to achieve a circular economy or a more circular economy, rather than the sort of insistence on tracking absolutely everything, systemizing everything and trying to capture the whole. You know, we have a very, very, very complicated global economy now, and even local national economies. So I think, you know, that there definitely is room sometimes for just proving that something is genuinely a circular service or a circular product, and then saying, actually, that makes it exempt and means it doesn't need hard and heavy regulation, because putting barriers up towards in respect of creating these reusable systems is obviously not going to accelerate their scale up and existence.
Thank you very much. I think we just have a few minutes left, so I'd like to ask you one last question to all of you, which is that we can see very fundamental differences between each of you, whether you're for-profit or not for-profit, covering one or several waste streams, but also at country level, at regional level. And yet, all the four of you, you're all examples of success. And so I'd like to know from all of you, what are the three keywords that you have in mind, or three key things that you think of for success, to have a successful EPR schemes?
I think from our point of view, we look at convenience and access for the public to make it easier for them. We're looking at continuous improvement. So we need to make sure that our program is accessible and is easy for everyone to participate in, and collaborating with other organizations, whether it's our collection sites, our members, or other PROs.
Thank you very much, Will.
From my point of view, I would say, first of all, it is important to be owned by producers and have them involved, fully involved in the governance of the PRO. So being really an EPR scheme, not a service provider. The second point is we should try to give the producers all the services they need in a one-stop shop logic. And the third one is we really have to strive for quality and maximize our efficiency.
Yeah, I think to run contrary to Giorgio not being owned by our producers, I think there is something for us in having a strong purpose. That's the reason why, you know, we've aimed not to be the biggest, we've aimed to be the best here in the UK. And so having a strong purpose of change for good and asking why are we doing things and what impact is it going to have is probably the one key thing that allows us to then attract passionate and talented people, as well as be picky about and sort of choosy about what customers we work with, because they share the same values as us. So we're in that privileged position. The second thing would probably success factor would be our agility. So we've been quite nimble with a very flat structure, and that allows us to make quick decisions, and as Giorgio commented, match the requirements and the expectations of the producer community. And I suppose the final thing that I would say, being a kind of disruptor in the UK marketplace that's grown very, very quickly over the last 5 to 10 years, is just boldness and willingness to change the status quo. You know, that coming back to it again, the distinction between wanting to be the biggest and a controlling factor, which we don't see as important, to actually being the best by having the most impact. I think that's been one of our key success factors.
Thank you, Robbie. And last words for you, Frederic, as we have 1 minute left.
Yeah, I think it's important to have the trust of our producers. They finance us, so we have to walk the talk and be trustworthy to them. And managing a non-profit or a profit company is not that different. We have to be efficient. It's the finality. We're not distributed profits, but we're just consolidating some reserve for the future. And it's a long-term effort. Then, of course, agility is important with efficiency and reactivity. We're usually lean companies. And I think what's very important is the fact we can be even more transparent as we are non-profit. So it is stressing our responsibility for the sake of the producers. And then we are back to EPR.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the four of you. I think it was a very interesting conversation. And I think I would leave the mic to Federico now.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you all for staying. Thank you, the participants, for staying with us, interacting, asking questions. I mean, we enjoyed this conversation. We enjoyed working on this project over the last months with interacting with you, Will, Robbie, Frederick, and the others. So again, I thank you. Thank you, Giorgio, for financing this, because that's also important. And we hope that this talk and what we found and we consolidated in the report will be useful to others as well. It's all available on Arion website, on social media. We posted, we will probably repost after today's webinar. We recorded this, so the recording will be maybe a little bit edited, but will be also available very soon for others that missed this part. So enjoy the rest of your day and have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Have a lovely evening. Bye.